What is up, my loves? Welcome back to another episode of the Fully Alive podcast. My name is Stephanie Ellsperman. I am your host today, and you are listening to part 4 of prep season, baby. Today in this episode, we are diving into the art of consistency and mastering how to get shit done and still have fun through, you guessed it, if you've read the title, structure, or what I like to call sexy structure, because it's the type of structure that actually creates more space for your creativity, more space for your rest, and more space for your freedom rather than taking it away. So you've all heard the saying that consistency is key for success. You might have already set your goals for the year. If you've been following along with prep season, you definitely have. You might have then even gotten clear on the habits that you want to start implementing within your life to close the gap from where you are to where you desire to be with those goals. But how do you actually set up your day to consistently follow through on those habits or goals and take action every single day? You might be the type of person who tries something for about a week and a half, 10 days, and by the third week, your motivation starts draining. And for some reason, you fall off the wagon and you don't know why. You're like, I know that I'm supposed to be consistent. I know that I need to be doing this over time. But for some reason, I just can't do it. So maybe I'm just not supposed to be consistent. But what if I told you that adding in just a little bit of structure into your day and into your week could be the secret sauce and not just achieving your goals, but doing so repeatedly over time with unwavering consistency, which leads to sustainable success, success that doesn't just come once and then go away, but you are actually able to grow it over the long term. In this episode, you are going to learn the 4 keys to making structure sexy again and how to structure your day and your week to show up consistently for your habits, get more rest, and still have fun with it. I'm going to give you the secret to breaking free from the misconceptions that structure is boring, leads to being overscheduled, or stifles creativity. And we're going to be making structure sexy again, so that you can continue following through on your habits and truly take your life, your career, or your business to the next level this year. So as I said at the start of this podcast, this is prep season. And if you've been here before, welcome back. So happy to have you for part 4, where it starts to get even more tangible and juicy in your life. And if you haven't been here before, welcome. Prep season is essentially the season from January through the beginning of March that I have declared as the season of life where we are preparing your life and even your business to be able to hold, grow, and sustain the success that you know is headed for you this year. If you're the type of person who set up the vision board, you know that big things are about to happen. It's now time to set up the identity, the habits, and the systems to be prepared for what's to come. So it's not, oh shit, what do I do with this when it inevitably comes? But of course, I've been waiting for this and I am prepared to be able to hold it, grow it, and evolve it. It's one thing to just attract success one time and another thing to actually keep it going over time. And that comes through preparing for what you've prayed for. So in part 1 of prep season, we reviewed this past year. We understood what the key golden nuggets of that entire year were so that we can bring them into this year. In part 2, we created a vision. We set your goals and stepped in to your next level identity for this new year. And in part 3, our last episode, we talked about why only 9% of people follow through on their New Year's resolutions. The key difference between those who succeed in accomplishing their goals and those who are in a continual state of trying to get there year after year, just trying to get there, never fully measuring up, and how to use habits to get 1% closer to your goals every single day. So we clarified what your needle moving habits need to be in order to close the gap from where you are to where you desire to be by the end of this year. And now we're going to take it one step further and talk about how to actually consistently implement those habits, right? Most people might just set the habits and be like, yeah, I'm just going to find time for them. They're just going to happen. But the truth is that in order to have consistency, we have to start to become artists of structure as well. So, most of the time with high achievers, you know that consistency is key. You know that you're going to get more done by showing up every single day over time than you are just sporadically taking action here and there. So, you might set the bar incredibly high for yourself and say, oh, well, I'm just going to start working out consistently, or I'm going to start showing up online consistently. You make the plan, you say 6 times a week, this is what I'm going to post, right? Then one of two things happens. You either become what I like to call rigid Rachel and you overly structure yourself and you create this insane pressure on your life, never fully relaxing because every single moment of your day is so structured. And if anything happens to get in the way of that structure, it is like, oh, the end of the world. So you might either reach burnout because you're overscheduled or sabotage the goal that you created because it's just too much work. And so you start to create this poor mental association between yourself and your habits or consistency because in the past it's created this sense of a lot of stress. Then on the other hand, we have laid back Lacey, who never plans when or how they're going to get it done. They just say, oh, it's going to happen. Like, I know it's going to happen, divine timing, all of that beautiful stuff. And then in the back of your mind, for the entire day, you have this tab open, trying to figure out when it will happen, which inevitably takes up space, just like all the apps that are open on your iPhone. It either does end up happening magically, and you're like, see, I knew it. Or life throws you a curveball that you're not prepared for and it just falls by the wayside. So you're stuck thinking that it's a you problem and downward spiraling around why you can't be consistent when in reality, it's not that you're incapable of being consistent. You just didn't have a structure in place to uphold the commitment that you made for yourself. When you sign up to be consistent, we also have to sign up to actually have things to hold that commitment in place. And this is where a dose of sexy structure comes in. So we've got to find this healthy middle ground where we have a structure that actually supports your goals and leads to more rest and creativity in your life rather than taking it away. So in this episode, we're going to dive into how to actually add simple structures to your day and to your week to increase your follow through on your habits and therefore your goals and really see come into fruition everything that you have prayed for this year. You better believe we're going to make it sexy. We're going to make it fun. It's going to be a blast. So let's dive into it. So first things first, what is structure? Let's define it so that we are all on the same page. You guys know that I love a dictionary definition. So if you go in the dictionary, the definition of structure is a coherent form or organization. So think about the structure of a building or the structure of your spine, the structure of a chair that is built, right? In our case, structure is just having some form throughout your day, in your business, in your life. It's a solid structure, a solid form that holds it up. Right? Think about if we didn't have spines, the structure of our spines in our bodies, what would happen to our bodies? We'd be these like blobs of stuff that wouldn't really know how to sit up straight or how to stand up straight. The same is true with having structure within our days, within our businesses, within our lives. It's about having a general outline of when certain things are going to happen and where that are like pillars that hold you up even when you're not feeling it. Even on those days where you're like, oh, the last thing I want to do is show up. My energy isn't there. I don't really feel motivated. Guess what? Your structure is there to hold you. And this is where it gets to be something that's so beautiful and nourishing because it doesn't place all of this emphasis on you and your willpower in the moment. If you can spend just a little bit more time creating a structure for yourself, you're going to thank yourself in the end on those days where you don't really feel it, where you don't feel like showing up. And you could so easily give in and just say, screw it, consistency is not for me. I'm just not going to show up for this habit. And therefore, in the long term, kind of put yourself back. If you want to put yourself ahead, create that structure that is so nourishing to yourself, especially on the days where you're not feeling it. I'll be so honest. There are some days where I do not feel like getting into a podcast outline. Why? Because my brain probably puts a lot of pressure on it to be absolutely perfect, right? But in those moments, that's where I have a structure to hold me so that I don't have to constantly be making all these decisions around what I need to do and when I need to do it and what it needs to look like. There's already structure put in place so that I can still show up consistently And 9 times out of 10, because I have that structure put in place, even when I'm not feeling it, the minute I get into it and I'm on minute 5 of doing it, all of that feeling of lack of motivation goes out the window because the hardest part is typically starting. So typically when I say structure, most people will have a reaction to it. And you might notice this within yourself so far. And it might be like, oh my God, I nerd out on this stuff. I love structure. Talk dirty to me. I want more. Or it might be like, whoo, I have so much resistance to structure because, Steph, you don't know me. You don't know my life. There are so many moving parts. I couldn't possibly be structured because X, Y, and Z. These are all the reasons. And wherever you're at, I absolutely love you exactly there because, again, I have been on both sides of this spectrum. And this is what I like to call the spectrum of structure. So, as I said previously, on one side of the spectrum, we have the rigid and overly structured. So, this is where you say from 5:16 to 5:24, this is what's happening. And then 5:24 to 6 p.m., this is what happens. 6 until 6:42, this is what's happening, so on and so forth. And I can tell you, that I could show you journals that I've had in the past where it is just filled with these lists of overly structured days. And this is where you might freak out if you're somewhat behind or your day gets out of order or chaos inevitably happens in your life and you have to restructure things. And it never really creates that sensation of fully resting because you're always trying to control the very next thing. Then we have on the other side of the spectrum, the hyper intuitive, free flowing, or laid back Lacey, where she's a little bit anti structure. You might just not like it at all and say, Steph, I want to be intuitive. I want to be free flowing. I want to do things when I feel my energy is aligned to it. I do what I want when I want. However, secretly, you might be just a little bit overwhelmed by all the things that are jumbled in your mind that you know that you want to do in order to follow through on your goals. And you know that you should be doing in order to follow through on your goals. And you're trying to figure out a place for all of it. So inevitably, you have all these tabs open, right? I will be super honest and say that I have been on both sides of the spectrum completely. After I was overly rigid, I was like, whoo, screw structure. I want nothing on my calendar. And that's when I feel most creative. You can't fuck with me. Right? And what I've learned is that there is a time and place for both sides, of course. However, like most things in life, to come into true harmony and be our most powerful on purpose selves, we need a healthy dose of both. And I always like to give this example because it is so telling. So I want you to imagine that I invite you over to my house and you walk into the kitchen and the first thing I do is I say, hey, you want some water? And you're like, yeah, actually, Steph, that would be great. I'm quite thirsty. And I say, okay. And I go over to the sink and I turn on the water and I just let it run onto the counter. And say, okay, here you go. Here's your water. What would be your response to me? You'd probably be like, Steph, that was great, but like, am I supposed to lick it off the counter? Do I need to like find a straw? Like, what am I doing? It's likely not going to quench your thirst because water with no container is just a puddle. Now, I want you to imagine if I invite you over, you walk into the kitchen and I say, hey, would you like some water? And you say, yeah, actually, Steph, that sounds great. I'm really thirsty. So I walk over to the cabinet, I pull out a glass. I say, okay, here you go. I just hand you the glass. You say, okay, Steph, this is great again, but there's no water in it. Like, there's nothing to quench my thirst. Am I supposed to drink the air? Like, what's going on here? Right? Likely, it's not going to be that nourishing for you either. Now imagine if I go over to my cabinet, I grab a glass, I take it over to the sink, I fill it up with water. I say, here you go, here's your water. Now you can actually drink the water. You can actually use it for something that's beneficial and nourishing to your body and to yourself. It's actually useful. And that glass was needed to create a container for the water to flow and therefore nourish you and be useful to your body and to yourself. And so just like a glass shapes water, it's not about constricting or confining the water, it just gives it shapes that we can use it. Structure also gives shape to your life. It's not about confining you to this specific way of doing things constantly, about giving your energy a purposeful direction so that it doesn't just evaporate into chaos. Because let's be honest, life is truly chaotic. There are so many things that are outside of our control. You could even say that 90% of things in your life are outside of your control. Unpredictable things might happen. Someone might get sick. Something crazy happens. Your motivation isn't there, whatever, right? And especially as women, we are cyclical beings. Our energy is not consistent every single day, and therefore our motivation also isn't that consistent every single day, right? We have differences in our energy depending on where we're at in our cycle, right? So when you're ovulating, you might feel like you're absolutely on top of the world and can handle anything. You're outward, you're super social, you're like, give it to me, I'm gonna take action on it. And then when we get into our luteal phase, we start turning more inward. Our energy lowers and we're more focused on the completion of tasks. Then we have your menstrual phase where you are fully internal. Your intuition is heightened. You might not have as much energy. And then we enter into our follicular phase where we start to be in more ideation, trying new things, planning things, and our energy starts to rise again. So naturally, you're going to have an energetic dip throughout the month. Instead of thinking that there's something wrong with you and therefore sabotaging your progress, like I used to do the week before my period. Plan for it. If you desire consistency, you have to have something, aka a structure, that is set up to hold you even when you're not feeling it. Even when your motivation isn't the highest it's ever been. You cannot rely on being high on life, baby, because we have emotions, we got feelings, we got all the different things, right? So this is where, again, structure comes in, and we can create a rough plan for when and where things are going to get done. It's going to increase your consistency and your follow through. And I'm going to show you as we go through this episode how to tangibly do that in your life. What happens when we create a rough plan is that it is literally proven that you are more likely to get what you want to get done. So there's a study by the American Society of Training and Development that says that having a plan for when you will complete a goal increases your follow through by at least 30%. That means you are a third more likely to actually get it done. Who doesn't want that? Like, yeah, sure, give it to me. All I have to do is have an outline. Okay, let's do it. B, it increases your inner authority and purpose. So, when you have some place to be, and let's say you're in a busy city and you are walking down the street to get to that place and you have a time that you're supposed to be there and you have calculated out how long it's going to take you, you are on a mission. You are walking with a purpose to get there. There is just an energy about you where people are not going to fuck with you. Where it's like, don't fuck with me because you are actually in charge. The same is true within our life, right? When you have somewhat of a structure of when and where things are going to happen, there's this sense of inner authority because you are in the driver's seat rather than just reacting to life. You are getting out ahead of it. And C, it decreases decision-making fatigue. Likely, if you are stretching yourself to do something in a new way, it's going to take a healthy dose of decision-making once you get into that task. So here's the truth is that making decisions is actually taxing on your brain. It takes just as much energy to think about something as it does to actually do it, which to me is so wild. And so one of the biggest disservices that we can do to ourselves is say that every single time you have to sit down at your laptop to, let's say, work on something that you really want to work on, you have to also decide what you're going to do. Because that decision making of like, oh, well, I could work on this or I could work on this and maybe I should do this because I don't know when this is going to get done. All of that actually takes up your mental energy that you could be using for the task at hand. If we already have a structure and somewhat of a rough outline for what is going to get done, all you have to do is just get into it. And I guarantee you're going to procrastinate less because your brain isn't already perceiving the energetic toll of making the decisions of what you're going to focus on. And this is where, again, structure gets to be so sexy and so fun and so nourishing rather than something that takes away from your life. It's something that adds, even if it takes a little bit more effort and energy in the beginning stages to set up. I'm telling you, it does. Like, it just naturally does take a little bit more energy to set up. However, in the long term, it's going to pay off. It will save you so much time. So to tie it all up, for things to actually flow in our lives, in our businesses, to have consistency and follow through, which is the name of the game for achieving the success that you have been praying for this entire year. It takes a healthy dose of structure, which is our inner masculine, with also some space for flexibility and intuitive impulses, which is our feminine. So I call this having a loose outline for your life with space for agility. Agility is that ability to be able to take anything that life throws your way and be able to make it work in your favor. So let's say there is an interruption that happens, you have the agility to be able to go and do something with it. Let's say you have an intuitive impulse of something that you really want to do. You've already decided that it's something that's going to benefit you rather than distract you. You have the agility to be able to move with it and restructure the rest of your day or your week accordingly. So now we're going to get into even more in depth the 4 ways that you can actually start making structure sexy again within your life and implement it so that you can master consistency and show up every single day for your habits and close the gap from where you are to where you desire to be this year. So the first way to make structure sexy again is a mantra that I started this podcast with, and it is that structure creates freedom. I want you to get it tattooed on your forehead, just like my clients. Right? When we have structure, the mind gets to rest knowing that there is a place and a time for everything. I cannot tell you, when I started structuring my day, my ability to rest and take naps in the middle of the day and be chill as I'm actually getting things done, not like freaked out trying to get 50 million things on my to-do list done constantly and calling it intuition. Holy cannoli. It's amazing. It is truly, if this is the one thing that you get from this entire podcast, let it be this: you will rest more when you have structure because you know that there is already a time and place for everything. You know that Friday at 9 a.m., this is what you're going to do, and it's already set in place. You don't have to think about it again. It is done and dusted. And of course, you can shift it, you can move it around, but it's done, right? Additionally, it creates more space for you to be able to move with your intuitive impulses. So if you already have that Friday afternoon is completely open for you to get to move with your intuitive impulses and be able to create freely because the other areas of your life are structured, so you don't have to worry about it. Holy moly, you have more freedom to actually be fully present during that time, knowing that everything else has a place. It's like bumpers when you're going bowling. We all love bumpers. I know I love the bumpers, right? They give you these edges. So if I look at my calendar and I know that from 10 a.m. until 2 p.m., I have creative work and I've already structured that in my day. P.S. I'm going to show you guys how to do this in the next couple of steps. But I've already structured that in my day. I know that I get to go fully in during that time because I have the structure set up where at some point it will end. There is another bumper on the other side of when it will end, and I'll get into my next task. So I don't have to be monitoring constantly and being like, oh, like maybe I should get into something else because maybe I've spent a lot of time here and I need to go do something else. It's like it's already been set up. Second way to make structure sexy again and start implementing it within your own life so that you can master consistency is by keeping it so simple. Absolutely simple, maybe. The easiest way to sabotage your own consistency is by overcomplicating it. And I see this all the time, especially with my high performers who like to go 0 to 100 real quick. You say, oh, I need to have these 5 million different routines and use all of these different apps and schedule it in this specific way in order to have structure. Absolutely not. Keep it so simple and you're going to increase your follow through. The easiest way I like to do this is by implementing a weekly planning date so that you can get out ahead of your week and be in the driver's seat. And if you want to steal my template that I use, the exact questions I take myself through every single week to set up my goals and to set up my structure for the week, that is going to be in the show notes. It's a Notion template. So if you use Notion, you are going to be in the right place. If you don't, you can still use it regardless. And this is where you go in once a week. I like to do mine on Sunday morning with my man. We literally make it a date. We make it fun. And you get out your calendar. You look at any events, any appointments, any dates that are important for the next week. I also sometimes like to look at the next week ahead in case there's any travel that I need to plan for, anything that's big that's coming up that week. But at least look at the week ahead and start to fit in the different key non-negotiables or your needle moving habits that we talked about on the last podcast. So this might be your workouts. I also like to schedule in dates and dates with friends. So Wednesdays and Saturdays, Nolan and I have date night. Wednesdays is at home, Saturdays is out doing something, and then friend dates. So when I'm going to catch up with friends, which is usually Friday morning. And then it starts to become like this puzzle, right? So you might start to notice, hey, Thursday, I have a really big meeting. I know Wednesday, I'm going to be preparing for that meeting. So it's probably going to be a better night to eat out or eat leftovers. Okay, so that means that on Tuesday, I'm going to cook and I'm going to cook something bigger so that I have leftovers on Wednesday. Right. And it starts to become this puzzle piece of how you can fit in different things into your week that match up with your goals. What I also love to do during this time, as little cherries on top, is to set an intention for the week. So your intention might be a specific energy that you want to bring into the week or perspective that you want to bring. It might be something that you want to work on, but it's this overarching thread that will then be woven through everything that you do. So, for example, last week, my intention was a mantra and it was, I am in charge of this. And it was essentially just reminding myself, like, hey, I am in charge of the week ahead. I am not a victim to it. I'm not at the effect of, like, I am in charge of this. Some weeks, my intention is, for example, agility. If I know I have a lot going on and I'm going to need to switch tasks pretty fast between things, I'm going to say, hey, I want to have agility this week where you can throw anything my way. I'm going to be able to spin it and make it work in my favor. I'm the queen of switching tasks and I've got this. Then you'll also want to set your top 3 priorities. So these are the 3 main things that if nothing else got done, it would be enough. The 3 most important things that you want that you know need to be checked off by the end of this week. I like to have a professional category and a personal category. One of the biggest issues that people have is prioritization. There was a quote that I recently heard, and I can't remember who said it, but they said, entrepreneurship is essentially effective prioritization. And I probably butchered that, right? But if you just create a to-do list, you say all of these things are important, your brain is not going to know what to specifically focus in on. However, if you can just take a second, prioritize what needs to happen first, second, third, the brain has a clear target to be able to hit, and I guarantee you're going to make more progress over time. Then, something that I like to just throw in here is as you're doing your weekly planning day, start taking note of the things that you do repeatedly. This is going to be incredibly helpful for creating repeatable systems in your life and in your business in the future. And hint, hint, we're actually going to do a bonus episode moving forward with systems and how to use systems to automate a lot of different things in your life and save you time. But the start of systems is really starting to recognize, what do you already do repeatedly? And then how can we create a system around that to make it more efficient, instead of reinventing the wheel every single time. So for example, this is where our Wednesday and Saturday night date nights came about. We started to notice that repeatedly we loved having 2 date nights per week where we just knew we could count on each other. We were going to be there and fully present. So we started to decide, hey, Wednesday and Saturday, it's set. Unless something else comes up and we talk about it, but it's set, we don't actually have to think about it. This is also where in my personal life, I have like a meal planning system. I have systems for travel. I have systems for every single thing in my business. I have systems for the podcast. Everything has systems because over time you start to see that most things are repeated and you can save yourself so much time by creating systems. That's a sneak peek for the next episode. So as you're doing this, the biggest thing to remember is that everything is data. So before we go any further with how to make structure sexy in your life and implement it, you have to start seeing structure as an experiment. So often I see people who are like, I just tried scheduling my entire week out once and it just didn't work for me. I fell off. It's way too unpredictable. So like, I just can't do it. Cool, right? But that's kind of all or nothing thinking, right? And the truth is that if you listen to the last podcast, our goal is to get 1% better every single day. My goal with my structures and every single week is to get 1% more efficient with my week than the previous week. So every single week, I'm recognizing what's working, what's not working, and I stay loose with it. I take it as all of these different data points rather than getting down on myself and saying, oh my gosh, well, I didn't show up for my habits this week. I look at, why didn't I show up for them? What happened? What got in the way? And where can I spruce up my structure a little bit more to be able to fully follow through? So please stop pulling the plug the minute that something is off or it doesn't work according to your plan. 1% better each week over time is going to do you so much better than trying to have this like perfect structure and perfect follow through all of the freaking time. You are human. Make space for your human, please. All right, so now into the more nitty gritty, which is structuring your day. So this is something that is incredibly personal because every single person who's listening to this is going to have different responsibilities, a different work environment, a different business, and what it calls from you. So take these and apply them to your own specific life, knowing that there is no one size fits all for structure. It is really about working with what is best for you and actually creates consistency in your life. So the third way to make structure sexy and implement it is to audit your time for 3 days. 3 days and 3 days only. That's all I ask of you. And I promise you, if you do this, it is going to be so eye-opening. It is always one of my clients' highlights, especially in purpose mastery. So the first step to actually creating an accurate daily structure, not just giving yourself something unrealistic that doesn't work for your life, is knowing where your time goes. This is so eye-opening, and it is consistently one of the biggest game changers for my clients when they go through it. Track your time for 1 to 3 days. Literally just on like your notes app on your phone. It takes a little bit of extra time in your day to be able to do this, but I guarantee if you can just do it even loosely, you are going to learn so much about yourself. And especially if you feel like your life is so unpredictable that you couldn't possibly put a structure to it, I want you to do this. I used to think that way where I was like, every single day is so different. I can't possibly create a weekly structure. Oh, was I wrong? When I audited my time, I was like, Steph, you are way more predictable than you ever realize. And yes, of course, things are different, but I started to recognize when I was naturally doing things. And there are way more consistencies than you might realize. So for example, I noticed that most of the time, if I didn't schedule my workout in the morning, it wasn't getting done. So I was like, okay, workouts are going to go at 8 a.m. I also noticed that my energy is higher in the morning, which means that my focused work is going to get done from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. I noticed that I need a break for lunch, and my energy usually dips from like 2 to 3 to 4-ish. So I'm going to schedule in my break there. And then I also started to recognize that no matter what call I was on, they would always energize me. Like every single call with my clients, anytime I'm on a podcast, anytime I'm in a meeting, my energy somehow just comes out of nowhere. So calls were going to be scheduled from 3 to 6 p.m. So as you can see, just starting to notice when I was typically doing things or when my energy was typically highest and typically lowest allowed me to create a loose outline for my day. And now, again, this is going to be a little bit different depending on the industry that you're in. If you're in a 9 to 5 or if you're in a business, do what works best for you. Still audit your time, right? Now, the next key from here is to actually structure your day. So now that you have a rough outline of when you naturally do things, it's time to add in your more concrete daily structure. And this is where I love to use a method called timeboxing your calendar. It is a tried and true method. It's been studied countless times, and it is essentially migrating your to-do list into your calendar. So instead of just saying, I'm going to get all these things done, you actually get a clear idea of where your focused work blocks are, where you have time and space to do them, and you put them into your calendar. So you have a plan of when things will actually get done, and it puts you in the driver's seat. So many people will say, hey, schedule your entire week out, time box your entire week. I am not a fan of that because I honestly think that it will likely be overwhelming and there are variables. Things change day to day. So I personally am a fan of having a daily structure date where first thing in the morning, the first thing I do when I open my laptop is based on my preset schedule, right? So the appointments, the meetings, the calls that I have. I then schedule in my work blocks, my focused work block. So let's say I know that I have calls from 3 until 5 p.m. I already know that from 10 a.m. until 2 p.m., that's going to be my most focused time, my max productivity. So I'm going to schedule in whether it's one full block or 2 mini blocks to get different tasks done there. Then I'll have a break for lunch between 2 and 3. And then after my calls at 5 p.m., I'll schedule in one last focused work block from 5 until 7 p.m. And then after that, dinner. So that is just getting the foundation set of like, these are the chunks of time that I actually have to get things done. Then from there, you look at your top 3 personal and or professional things that you want to get done. So these might be the habits that you have set in place based on our last episode. And now you start allocating those to your focused work blocks and the time chunks that you have throughout that day. So when are you going to get them done? And also, when are you going to rest? And then in the evening, at the end of the day, I personally like to tie it all up with a bow and already look at what are my 3 main priorities for the next day, such that when I go into my daily planning date in the morning, they're already there. I already know what needs to get done. I'm not spending time figuring out like, oh, what am I supposed to be working on today? Which inevitably is going to slow you down and typically will lead to more procrastination because your brain already has to overcome the barrier of deciding what to work on. You've already done it and you can just get into planning and then work. So of course, as you are planning out your day and you're creating structure to your day, things will come up and take you off of your structure. Of course. However, if you have a set structure, you can actually see what is necessary to come up and take you off of your day and what is a distraction to what you're supposed to be getting done. So do your best to stick to the time that you had already set up, and you can always adjust it the next day or the next week. Of course, you won't always be feeling it. Some days your motivation is going to drop and you're just not going to feel like getting into the thing that you had scheduled. Some days I'm going to sit down to create an outline for a podcast and I'm just not going to be feeling it. But here's the thing, the hardest part is starting. So I guarantee that if you were to sit down and put a timer on your phone for 25 minutes, you would surprise yourself at how much you actually get done, because as soon as your momentum picks up, you're going to be golden, because the entire vibe of this season is creating consistency in your habits such that when your success comes, you are already set up. The muscles are already flexed. So you don't have to all of a sudden create this new set of habits. You have already been being the person who is there, who is able to hold, grow, and evolve your success when it drops in your lap. And the bonus key that I have for you is to have fun with it. Make structuring your day and your week a vibe. There's a reason why my motto is get shit done, still have fun. We gotta have fun while we're doing it. Otherwise, there is no point. So whether that is you light a candle when you're getting into your weekly planning date, you put music on, you make it a fun little, like Nolan and I will sometimes go out to breakfast and do this together. We'll go to a little coffee shop or we'll go for a walk to get it done. Daily structuring is honestly my favorite part of the mornings because I get to see that there's a time and place for everything and it just gets me excited for the day ahead. So have fun with it. Have the best time. And of course, because it's prep season, linked in the show notes, I'm actually giving you the exact Notion template that I use to structure my entire week. So if you want to steal what I use to set up every single week, you can go ahead and find that link in the show notes. With all that said, I hope that you got something valuable from this podcast episode. Go into your life. Maybe it made structure just a little bit more sexy in your life. Have fun implementing, and I will see you on the next episode.